and bring it to the kitchen, give it to the maid, and say thank you unfeasibly. I want my children to grow up with a value of gratitude. Okay, and this is a value and a very good value I want to pass on to all 42 of you. You know, those, again, I said this last week, and as long as you're here, I'll say that again, Mr. Pang. Dr. Ong is not here today because he's outside settling a problem that I might have created. Okay, they might have come when you're on your way to school. They may have seen other classes, side balls, they are roaming around. That was a result of my doing, and I apologize for that. Okay, I have a lot of apologies to do this to me. And he's settling my problems right now, and the three gentlemen in the back, the guy on the computer, Rizwan, Top One, and also Kyrone. I don't want to start this lecture without telling you. Alright. These are the true unsung heroes. Heroes who do so much when nobody is watching. They may not even get a salary increase. They may not even get a promotion out of doing this. But they're just doing this faithfully just because of it. Okay, Wenchi. Now, there's something I wanted to tell you this morning because you came in early. But I got so caught up with all the SMSs and the coordination with stuff on the various people. I didn't have a chance to talk to Nancy, but this is the same message I want to tell all of you. Whether you're a guy or a girl, many of you here, and Mr. Pang and myself share this and many of you will become very great in the very near future. You will become leaders of different sorts, either in your own family, you become leaders either in the army or in your company or whatever it is, right? Now just remember one thing. I want you to pay forward for good things that people have done for you right here. Not just about me alone, but also people that whose names that you may not even know. Okay, if you ever get a scholarship and you hold a high rank and you're in your position in the company, I want you to pay forward and I want you to embrace an attitude of gratitude. Okay, if there's anything that I'm proud of about myself, it's not because of accomplishment, but the reason why I'm here today holding a high position is because there were people who gave me the necessary nurturing. And that is what I'm doing for you. I think this. Okay, Rachel. Alright, when you have great accomplishment in your future, I know that some of you thought I don't even see what I'm going to have for lunch later. Let's not talk about future. But many of you will have a great future today. Please remember, you never lose the attitude of gratitude. And for that, I just want to thank this thing just one more time. I will do that again and again. Alright, Mr. Pang especially. Alright, so I've given a very, very long introduction, and you know that the fact that I spent a lot of time saying something for it is because it means a lot. And I hope that it means a lot to you as well, Jeremy and the rest of you. Okay, so what I'm going to do for Sports Q3, this is your second task. Now you can recall your first task, which you have copied, alright, and you have learned about the various types of variables. Now you need to keep that. Okay, you need to keep that. I'm not requiring that because I gave you most of the answers. We have some discussion. That's great. Now today's task is going to be slightly different because I'm going to evaluate them and I'm going to mark them as well. Okay, so today's lesson will be for 2 hours. The first hour, this is what we're going to do. Again, I'm going to lead you through the discussion with variables like what we did last week. Because today, you may end up with some variation as well, which is what I'm going to expect of you. We'll do the same thing. We'll do group creation or investigating plan. But this time around, why did I say multiple design? Because last week, we consolidated with just one set of variable, the independent and the dependent variable. And I stepped you through the procedure. Today's lesson, I'm going to look at your own independent and dependent variable. I'm going to ask your group to use your own variables. Which means to say, if you have 2 or 3 different types of variables, we will have multiple designs today. Alright? And so the first hour, we're going to, about less than an hour actually, we're going to dedicate less than an hour just to create investigating plans. And I saw some of you coming to this venue today with your task 1, and I hope that you revise on the kind of requirement I want for task 1. Okay? So some of you brought your task one things which is good for you. You can refer to that and you will create the investigative plan for task number 2 collectively as a group. Okay, and I'm going to tell you how to do that. The second hour, during the second hour, I'm going to get the groups to provide feedback for other groups' work. And then you take it back, you perform correction on the spot. All within the first and the second hour. And then the remaining time, I'm going to get the groups after you have done your correction using feedback given by other groups. You will then carry out the experiment. Okay? Now this experiment, you see the apparatus is a lot simpler today. It's very easy to do. This experiment you will do collectively as a group of 7 as well. Alright? But then you will end up writing the group report. So for those of you who already have a copy of this SPARL Skill 3 Investigative Plan task on the table, you'll realize that there are actually 2 sets of reports inside. Listen carefully, don't do the wrong thing, okay? Because you're going to do this as a group. Now the first 4 pages are what you will do together as a group. Listen carefully. One group will only have one of this. And it will be done on Google Documents. So one of you will type. The last page is called Group Laboratory Report for Task 2. This one you will also do as a group. But listen carefully. This one you will do on paper. I don't know whether you can't do because there's a lot of instruction here. So listen carefully. The first 4 pages you'll do as a group on Google Document. The last page, page number 5, which does not have the page number over here, is a report that you will write, just like in SPARL Skill 1 and 2, after you conduct the experiment. This, you write in a group and you will hand out to me on paper. So these are your 2 deliverables today as you read this class. Okay, now the first thing that I'd like you to do is to look at this particular experiment. I'm going to start right now properly. Your job today is to design a laboratory experiment to investigate how the weight of an object. Now, what is this weight of the object that I'm referring here is this thing. Now, all of you on the table, you should be able to find this little container with some masses. There should be about 5 of them. Okay? So make sure you keep them together later on. And under the cap, you should be able to see a lump of blue tags. Now this blue tag, ladies and gentlemen, is for you to stick these masses together. Why? Because you will eventually end up changing the amount of weight that you're going to use. So listen carefully. There's no string, there's no thread, there's no scotch tape. All you need to do, because you're investigating friction today, it's very important that you stick all these masses together without the use of any other thing other than glue. That's what the blue tag is for. At the end of the experiment, please help me put the blue tags together. Right? I've already made a lot of people angry today. So please, my left tag is my last tag on the planet. Okay, so please put them together nicely later on. Okay, so your job, your task today is to investigate how the weight of an object, referring to the masses which I just talked about, will affect the minimum angle of inclination. The angle of inclination is an idea that came from mathematics. What is the angle of inclination to you? Someone. What's angle of inclination that you learned in that? Lower secondary, I think. Elevation angle. Can you demonstrate? You know? Now let me give get a more down-to-earth explanation. What is the angle of what is this angle of inclination? Someone said is the elevation angle. That's not wrong. It's a very technical understanding. Someone has a simple understanding what is the angle of inclination. Don't know this, you can't do the experiment. Ryan, what does angle of inclination mean to you? What does it mean to you? Do you know what it means? No, okay, let's try someone else. Don't be too much. Isabella, what does it mean to you? Don't know also? Oh, Rick. Oh, you all? Did this class go through your secondary 1 and 2 before it comes to 3 months? Okay, how about Adele? What does angle of inclination mean to you? Upwards. What kind of angle is that? Can you demonstrate it? Can you show us the angle? Okay, what is this? Slope, right? So where's the angle of inclination? Right here. You are not wrong, but that was a very technical understanding. Alright, I'm trying to get you guys to understand this. It's the elevation angle. So when you go up the slope, there's an elevation. The angle between the slope here, this is the slope or the inclined plane. The angle between this slope and the horizontal, this angle over here, is the angle of inclination. So what does this statement mean? Let's read this again. Design a laboratory experiment to investigate how the weight of the object, your mass, will affect the minimum angle of inclination for sliding the object. What does this sentence mean to you? Okay, so that is my first question. What does this mean to you in your group? And then you also discuss if you understand this as a group. So what would your independent variable that you control, like what I talked about last week, be? And what will be the variable that you will measure or calculate? Alright, I'm going to give you 3 minutes in your respective group. Can you discuss what this means to you and what the variables will be? Now I'm going to again ask you to, on your computer, launch PowerPoint, write one of the names in there, and tell me what the variables will be. Okay, you will do that for the next 5 minutes. Remember to use large font size, not for the floor. You may start discussing your groups, what the variables mean. Please start your name. I know some of you are doing some other things. You shouldn't do your account, right? Okay, what's the long name? Make sure you write it down so you know who you are. Which group says you don't need to log in? Can you launch PowerPoint?
Just log in.
Okay, let's just wait for a little while. Just to check if you exchange one of the, yeah, doesn't have shop cover. Yes, where was the last group? Oh, now the change. Join 406. Right here. Yeah, you join us. It's okay. Alright, great. Gio, can I draw your attention back here again? When I did this experiment this morning, I was quite concerned that I might not get a lot of variation. Can we stop drawing sloppy in the class group? And just about the I was quite concerned whether we get variation. Apparently, yes, we do. Can someone tell me what is the variation is? Can someone tell me what are the different kinds of independent variables are we seeing? Tim, can you tell me? There are some differences. What differences? We're a mess. Okay, GR, we're still all over the place. Already. We go over there. Okay. Let's do it over there. Oh yeah. This is, I was not told that I cannot give you a recess earlier. After my lesson is history. Recess, yeah. But if I finish earlier, there's no stopping me from giving you early recess, right? So that's a good base. How can I have all of the attention here? Check is correct. There is a variation in the independent variable. This is a big place, alright? Now, first of all, we can see that Crystal, Adele, Jeremy, and Howard's group they were using the mass of the object as the independent variable. In fact, most of this group even hears the symbol M, 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 and G. Hey, don't laugh. It's okay. It's okay. G is like, oh, because I've seen the wrong thing. It's actually you know, the good thing is that their mistakes in life can just change. But their mistakes in life once again. Okay, I'm just being random. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, look here. Later on the four group, listen, I'm going to stick to your set of variables if they are correct. By right, the question says wait. But if you use math, that's not entirely wrong. Now the four groups, they use math as an independent variable. Be very careful that you use M and /G throughout the entire experiment. Now for the other two groups that use weight, W, you are sticking closer to what the task of the day is. So make sure that you use capital W / throughout the entire experiment. That's not wrong. How about the dependent variable? Do I have any variation? Go ahead. Can you look? Across the 6 groups, are there any variations in the dependent variables that all the 6 groups use? Minimum angle of inclination to mean the same thing. Now it's just the unit of class, you're all very dispersed today. Okay. But you're just being yourself, alright, even though this is recorded. For most of you, you're able to write the device is down here, which is fine. Okay, now on this particular group over here, Ryan's group, if you look across the 6 groups, all your dependent variables are the same, then it's fine. It's only the independent variable that are different. So all the 6 groups, listen to my instruction. Before we go on to the next part, all the 6 groups will use your own set of independent and dependent variables. Except that for Ryan's group, your symbol cannot be X. Angle is usually theta. Alright, that's what we are writing here. So for those of you later on, if you cannot, the other groups, if you cannot use the symbol, make sure you type them as theta. Alright? So today we have only 2 variations, mass and theta, weight and theta. What is the symbol for weight? What is the unit for weight and theta? I mentioned this earlier. That's the symbol, but the unit is Newton. Okay? Now what we're going to do next is this. Anyone has any question? You see, that's what I used to. Weight of the object, minimum angle of inclination. Any question about variable set? The task 3, which I'm going to give to you at the end of this session, which you will do individually, it will not be so simple. It will be more variation. Okay, so I would like all of you to just minimize this and launch Chrome if it is not already running. There's Google Chrome, can you run it? And I want to give you more instructions. Now the next part of the lesson will be on yourself, but I need you to listen to my instruction, run Chrome. Now listen carefully. You will see that at the top, bookmark, you will see a folder called 4GR here. And if you click on it, you will be able to see all the 6 groups over there. Now, can I draw your attention right here? This particular group, click on 4GR, and you realize there are all 6 different groups of documents here. Now, your groups 1 to 6 will be labeled as follows. Adele, group 1, Wenjing, group 2, group 3, group 4. Group 5 is Rayann's group, group 6 is Brian's. You will launch your own documents right now. I'm going to give you further instructions on what to do. You should be able to see something that looks like this. Okay, make sure you're in your own groups, alright? Now the first thing first, later on, as you're working on it, I want you to type all the 6, 7 group members' names in, must be 4GR, and what is this date? Is today's date, 29th of May. Now listen carefully. I'm going to give you 20 minutes, Ryan. 20 minutes, GR, to fill up this entire document, all the way up to procedure. There's no need, listen carefully, there's no need to write in sources of error and precaution for now. I'll tell you what they are. Fill up your problem statement, fill up your variables, diagram, see if you can draw, if you cannot, you just need it for the time being. And I want you to fill up the entire procedure using the guiding questions that's already in the document. You can refer to my requirement in house 1. Okay, I'm going to walk around to help you. If you have any questions, you can put up your hand. I'm going to give you 20 minutes. The group that discuss what you should write as your variable, the procedures in the diagram. 20 minutes later, I'm going to tell you what to do. Any question? No? Okay, now the time is 8:40. We'll end at 9 o'clock. You may begin. Okay, whatever you touch, they're all going to show up here. It's quite okay. Yeah, please. Fill up the leftmost column. You may want to expand the view so that your group can see. This view allows you to see the entire document which you can expand. Expand so that your entire group can see the document. You guys can expand your view so that the group can discuss as well. So you want to do this one, right? Control plus and control minus to expand or diminish your Now, to be fast, some of you might want to write out the procedure using the hard copy and pass it to the typist. Okay, that's another method you can do. If you want to write it out first before the time, that's why I give you the hard copy. You all can use the hard copy to write out the procedure first, and then you can pass it to the down. That's a lot of the diagram, then write down on the back of your shirt.
Most of the watch
Class, keep the diagrams, move on the procedure because you can't draw in here. Okay? So don't have to worry about Okay, now you guys should be moving on to your constant and also your L-shaped support. Okay, it should be somewhere around right here. Apparatus right Forget about move on from the drawing, move on to the procedure. Who is this Gamble group? This is group 5. Is your Gamble group that is doing the Start. Move on to the procedure because that one's tough. That one costs more. Young man should get off the very small way of
以為10萬，原來可能萬。
You already completed? Just something interesting. You all do realize that the lesson is live on YouTube, right? I just received a comment. Oh, someone watching. Copy. The link still doesn't matter. You guys are doing great. Okay, good. Some of you already finished. Two, right? You all want to guess what the precaution is also, right? Okay, good job. Yes, Alright, very good. There's progress. It's not something you can like. So okay, this group right how is this group coming along? Yeah, I want to do up to massage guys done yet? So this is the table. We're not taking averages, we have our Group 6 as well. Group 6 is still having a little, right? So, powering, still looking at the rest of the resistance. Now, walk around and answer some of the questions and look at what you guys have typed. Some of the groups will instruct your answers were like, it makes me feel like I'm reading the instructions from your workbook itself. Now that is a complement in case you don't know, which means to say the way your sentences are written are so standard. It is what instructions will look like in experiment. So that's great. Alright, now for the other groups, your sentences were between that kind of level and as well as your own thoughts. But one thing I liked, what I saw, was that in fact even in Jinghai's group, they were still working on it. The flow of your experimental design, right from, listen carefully, right from how you set the experiment up, what to control, what to measure, how you vary them for 5 different sets of values, and how you eventually what graph you plot. They were very coherent, they were consistent, and that's what we're looking out for. Okay, now every one of you are listening. I know that this is very tiring, but imagine you are starting from the next task all the way to your SPA assessment, Joshua. You'll be doing this all by yourself. Doing in group is difficult, right, Sheila? Right? Doing it alone will be even tougher. Okay, so my next instruction for you is this. Before I get you to carry out your experiment, which is going to be done within 15 minutes, I want you to do the next part, which is the highlight of today's lesson. Group 5, are you all done? Group 6, are you done? Great. Okay, listen carefully. Now, I want you all to do what you all were born to do. You see? The next part of the lesson, I want all of you to do what you were all born to do. Find people's mistakes. You don't have to be taught to do that. We're all born to know how to do that. Treat me first. He make me money. I don't have to teach you. You know that, right? Energy can't free install with this software. Okay, so listen carefully, GR. I'm going to exchange our group right now. And I want you to be as critical as possible and tell the group what's wrong. So listen carefully, the instruction is this. Don't pause first. This group is still writing group 1, never mind over here. They go. I want you to go from one section to the other. Skip the diagram. I want you to tell them what's wrong. If it's right, leave it. If the group that you're evaluating, everything is correct, leave it blank. If there's something that's not right, tell them what is wrong. Now, listen carefully. Sometimes the sentences written by other group may be so wrong. The only way to save them is to rewrite for them. Listen carefully. Some other groups' sentences may be so wrong that the only way to tell them what's wrong is to rewrite for them. You understand? Rewrite just that part. Okay? Now as I walk around, most of the groups should be quite okay. I want you to take about 10 minutes because it's easier to find other people's fault, right? Writing your own thing is more difficult, but finding other people's fault is very easy. Okay, I come from a family that anything that happens that's wrong is always my fault. Okay? But also mine is also very easy. Okay, so this is how we're going to solve Group 1. Group 1, what all of you will do is to close your original, if you have finished, can you all close your own group first? Close your own group. Close your own group. Close your own group. Doesn't work. Close your, just click on the right button. Yeah, close your own group is already safe. No need to. Okay, group 3. Group 3, can you close by clicking on the X? Yes. This group can you close. This group 2. And this group also group 5. This group 4. Don't open. Okay. You open Chrome. Group 2, you will take group 6. Group 2, you can take group 5. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, 10 minutes, you may begin criticizing and firing. Okay, our time is 9:20. the kind of thing I usually do. What's the statement, right? I might want to expand so that your entire group can see together. Expand the view so that your entire group can see yeah, expand or if not, you may have the crowd around.
You know how we do it, right?
Oh, by the way, I think I'm not having
Nice try.
Let me explore the possibility
像弹到手，
哎，对了，
拉稀巴就闪， might be the gang.
Well, technically, as of right now, let me just after 30 more minutes, I'll tell you one last thing to do. Listen carefully. This is the first time a star skill 3 is taught ever, and it's not just in this school. I just learned yesterday that in the entire country of Singapore, this is the first time that anyone has learned star skill 3 in the world. And as I'm talking to you, Mr. Ting is also doing similar things, using similar approach without this benefit of all these things in a different manner. Well, the reason why we're doing this, I've said before, I hope that this experience is worthwhile. Okay, so if you ever think of doing physics or science ever again, this experience is useful to you. Okay? Now when I walk around, I see that most of you were very engaged in this class, physics-related stuff. And saw some of the comments like this one. It is not a meter rule, it's half a meter rule. So there's the consistency. And what methods are you talking about? And also some comments about whether telling another group that you need to be consistent with the symbol that you use when you're listening. Okay, listen carefully. Now these comments are really good. Because when you're writing your own report, there are always inconsistencies. Now listen carefully. Particularly in the writing of procedures. In the writing of procedures, there are particularly a lot of mistakes that can cost you a lot of precious marks. And when you're writing that, sometimes you don't see it until a different group who saw your report entirely, your plan entirely new, and they will be able to point out these mistakes. So the last two things I'm going to ask you to do, listen very carefully. Now the things that you have been doing today, first time ever in history, it's all been recorded and edited. Mr. Pang and myself may or may not take this to Berlin, but we'll take this across the world. That is the promise that we'll keep. Okay, so the last two things that you will do is this, these things. You will close the other groups' work. You will open up your own. Your job is to look at the comments that other groups have given to you. You look at what I'd like you to do is in your own groups, I would like you to divide your own group into two. One, there's a third column, right? Look at this. This first column is your original design. The second column, the other group will giving you comments. Now in this last 30 minutes, I want all of you to do this and listen very carefully. Let's look at G and the rest of the school. The last 30 minutes, half of the group will look at the comments. Again, this group not anymore. Yeah, I feel a bit easy. The half of the group will look at the comments of what the other group wrote for you, and you do your correction here. Especially if the comment is valid. Okay? Please do not reply them if the comment is silly. Just ignore. If the comments are not right, leave it. Don't score them. Okay? This is what this is for. The last column is for me to give you a final comment of this thing. This report, after I write the last comment of column 4, I'll print out for every one of you, for your own group. You will receive, when you return from school, a holiday, and you put it inside your mouth for 10 weeks. So if there's any silly comment in there, please remove it. The other half of the group, listen carefully. The other half of the group, you will use your original design and plan, and you will carry out the experiment. Some of you are not listening. And after you carry out your experiment, the other half of the group will write your report. with your tabulation, does any calculation? No, right? Because he didn't ask you to do gradient. You need to plot your graph, write a conclusion. Is it a linearly related or non-linearly related relationship? The sources of error are two, if you have, and then you submit to me as a group. Half of the group will do correction. The other half of the group will conduct the experiment and write the report. Now listen carefully. What happens if the other half of the group that does correction has no correction to do, or you complete the correction? You join back the other half of the group to write the report. Is that clear? Okay? And then I'll end off with the last instruction. Class is 9:35. Can I give you all 15 minutes to do that? Because this is a very simple experiment. Okay? All 6 groups, 15 minutes, do your correction using the third column, carry out the experiment, and write the final report. You may begin. Yes. Then you just become it. This one, Oh, you okay? Alright, you're learning stuff here, right? Well, you look like you're very miserable in the company of roses. Well, next time I will arrange that you sit in a group of guys. I'll let this privilege you okay? You alright lah? Yeah. That's right. Say hi. How's it going?
Anything there? Go.
Oh shit, wait, you stand there, can you see me?
Okay, we need to do this.
Can you see me? Hey.
Do any of
Come on, hell. Oh no, bro. I said yes, Bro, I don't think we can release earlier. So done with our I need to see this one. It's live. Oh, it's lagging. It's live.
testing.
It's on both sides, no, you see this or what? Okay, the one is
After that, draw the graph, show to me. Let's do this quickly.
Shit, I think masih sudah ya. Body
You see
Also, like people inside the shop.
Okay, 3 more minutes, photograph,
But you didn't put Chinese for maybe you can decide. Because like some of them have what? They put 4 papers. Yeah, I think shop like I go back.
The mess of
Hopefully, I'm always
mess of weight, mess of object and
I don't know if he said with one like
Guys, what do you mean? We should all put in a position that gets promoted soon, right? Doing a good job. You have no idea how much hard time I've given to Mr. Park just to get this thing working. And I confess that I'm bullying him all the time. I can't help it. It's too cute. Anyways, I don't know about you, but this 2 hours of lesson Sherman is what the teachers and myself put together. It's the first time top of physics for 16, 17 years. This is the first time doing it like that for you. For me, I have a lot of satisfaction just to see how they try to work. It's the first time we're doing it like that. It's intended to be like that. And even I was talking to the teachers just now, there was someone who was watching you live. That's why someone you have to be very careful of what you say, how you behave yourself, how you touch your faces, because people are watching you live all internationally. I received a message to say that she was excited to see what was going on during this lesson. Okay, so that's good. Before we say goodbye, I won't see you anymore, right? Right, this week. So listen carefully my remaining instructions before you go for the recess. Can I have all your complete attention? Yeah, you still have. Okay. The online investigation part of plan, I will not. That is my duty. Listen carefully, I don't have all of that attention. And you know I like everyone listening to me right now. Yes, thank you very much. Later on, when you leave, I want 6 group reports. Not investigating plans. The Google Doc is what I want, but you don't have to submit that one. There's what with the experiment that you conducted with the graph stapled together. I want to make sure that all your 6, 7 names are written in there. And then you hand out to me before you go. Okay, last instruction for tomorrow's lesson. Listen carefully. This is what I want you to bring. I want you to bring your theory workbook as well as your consolidation notes for chapter 21. Okay? Because I'm going to complete chapter 21 and tomorrow's lesson is going to be difficult. Why? Because I'm going to help the class understand how the DC motor actually works. And it's not easy. So I need you guys to come fresh tomorrow. I'll do my very best to help you guys understand. So that's for tomorrow's lesson. Tuesday's theory workbook, consolidation notes for chapter 21. And your please as you leave, put the apparatus in the tray, another tray. Okay, make sure they go all into the yellow tray. Take your tennis screen back and start doing that. Any last question for me before I dismiss the class? No? Okay, that's all I have about that. Actually, you have Okay, all look at the front. I'm going to let you roll.